Allison, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Perfect, thanks.
call the meeting to order for it's Thursday, March the 6th, and it is the special meeting of Municipal Council of the District of Lunenburg. And to those who are in our gallery and to those who may be watching at home, it's a pleasure to have you join us and to hear our discussions around the capital budget that we will start to hear for the second time, and with I'm sure some more questions and discussion related to that. As we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we are in Mi'kma'ki, the traditional territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Are there any changes or additions to the agenda? Otherwise, I would accept a motion to approve the agenda. Moved by Councillor Moore and seconded by Councillor Oikel. All those in favor raise their hands. Those opposed, motion is carried unanimously. At this point, I will turn the meeting over to our Director of Finance, Ms. Wenzel. But just for those, Ms. Vino in the gallery, there will be an opportunity if you want to provide public input. We will allow that as we go along. We'll break and have an opportunity for that. For the councillors, I would ask that you restrict your discussion initially as we go through section by section to questions that you might have for clarification. And then once we have public input, then we can take that along with any other issues we want to raise in terms of deliberation or conversation. We can have that afterwards. So at this point, we'll begin and follow along with questions that need clarification, and opinions you may have on changes you want to see made we'll deal with later.
Thank you, Mayor McLean-Weil. So welcome to our second capital budget meeting this week. This is the fourth meeting we've had on our budget so far in the last 2 weeks. So tonight we'll be looking at the capital budget, and we know that we'll be getting public input and looking for some options and revisions discussions. So today I'll be taking you through the process, parameters, and fundamentals of your capital budget. Our department directors are here to present their department capital budgets. There will be opportunity for public input. Council will receive the budget information, listen to the input, ask questions of staff for a better understanding, and identify areas for further discussion, options, or analysis. Because we've repeated this tonight, hopefully everyone's had a little time to reflect and think about what we've heard, and certainly we're here to answer any questions you might have. So when we develop our capital budget, we determine what projects are necessary for things like environmental sustainability, infrastructure master plans, legislative requirements, community wants and needs, strategic planning, as well as asset management for replacement and refurbishment. And those feed into our priorities for decision-making, which become part of our long-term capital plan, and we translate that plan into our capital budget. Municipalities charge taxes and fees to provide services that contribute to the quality of life for our residents. Capital infrastructure is the foundation of those services that we provide. Our projects are categorized based on Council's strategic priorities, which include communication and engagement, climate change action, infrastructure upgrades, expansion and management, quality of life, regional economic development. All the departments support the priorities to bring your service outcomes, which include promoting health and wellness, protecting our residents, moving people through active transit or public transit, foster sustainability, create community inclusivity, facilitate growth, and protect and maintain our community assets. Capital does compete for resources. So as a staff team, we do review our competing projects and determine financing and look at intermunicipal cost sharing agreements. So investment in large-scale projects may require a trade-off for capital maintenance items, and capital costs and ongoing maintenance costs are certainly a consideration when we develop the budget. We look at various ways to finance the budget that we present. We use grants, our own reserves. We look for contributions, sometimes from our operating fund towards capital, as well as we have land sales and third-party contributions. We would use for collaborative projects. We have other municipal units that would contribute to those. And in the end, when there's a capital project funding gap, which is the difference between the capital needs and our financial capacity, we use debt to bridge it. So debt is a strategic tool, and we have a debt management policy, and communication of that policy is a key component of our plan. Municipalities are a going concern. Debt can be leveraged for up to 25 years. It allows for regeneration of financial capacity through our debt payments. It allows for intergenerational equity using debt facilities. Future residents would be paying for their fair share of the capital project. As well as it could be considered an inflation shield. As project costs go up in the future, debt provides protection for that. When we look at our capital budget, we do it on a 5-year basis. Tonight, we will be just looking at the year one projects. However, the 5-year strategy kind of informs our decision-making. So the 5-year plan is a $70 million capital plan. Our municipal cost is about 31% of that, or $22 million. There are debt projections in this capital budget for large-scale projects like sewer infrastructure. So this is an overview of the draft capital budget by category. Engineering Public Works has the most significant capital investment this year with the upgrades to the Cookville wastewater treatment plant. There's 37 projects in our $18 million budget. Not far behind that, well, quite far behind that, Recreation, Parks, and Tourism is about $2.7 million. We have some grants through administration, we'll be talking about in details later, and other departments will discuss as we go. So the funding for this year's year one includes provincial, federal grants of just over $10 million, $4.8 million from our own reserves, $1.7 million from the Canada Community Building Fund, as well as our depreciation reserves and some small sewer and open space reserves. This is a slide of our reserves. On the left, you can see that the operating reserves are the large blue lines, and capital reserves are quite small. Operating reserves are very flexible, so we tend to put more money into our operating reserves and only put what we have to in our capital reserves. The red line on the left is an FCI benchmark of 10% of our total operating budget, and the financial condition indicators do not want to see us go below 10% in our operating reserves, so that's what that red line is for. On the right slide, that's our combined reserves. So we take both operating and capital, add them together, and then we overlay them for the same kind of benchmark, but those are actually over your total operating costs plus your amortization. So you can see that this budget does keep us within our projected combined reserves with a small dip in the 4th and 5th year.
Can I just ask a question on the funds we're holding in reserve? How do we manage that from an investment point of view?
The funds are actually held in our bank account on deposit. We have a very lucrative banking agreement. It's 1.75% below prime. And I can't get a 1-year GIC for that. So we want to keep it liquid. We would look at investing it in longer term if we could get better returns. But the banking agreement gives us a very good return on our money. So we've continued to use that as our investment vehicle.
And that would be both operating and the combined reserve with capital funds?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
The details behind our 5-year financial strategy, these are all of the reserves that we are holding to make up those numbers. So we have them for a variety of purposes. We won't get into each one, but certainly if anyone has any questions, we're happy to answer those. So those are our operating reserves, which shows you that right now there's 27 at the end of March 31st, 2024 forecasted. And by the end of 2030, there'll be 11.7 million there. The capital reserves we're holding right now are of about 4.2 million. Will be about 3.5 million by the end of the 5-year plan. So our debt projections include debt in years 2 2 through 5, just for 2 items, the wastewater treatment plant in Cookville and the wastewater treatment plant in New Germany, which is another capital cost we know that's coming up. So we also look at our projections of potential debt servicing. So the debt service ratio is set at 15%, which is the red line on the slide. That is another financial condition index benchmark. So that's 15% of your total operating budget. As you can see, the potential debt projections are a lot lower than that. So we have capacity to borrow, and we're good financial shape.
On that, the projections for borrowing in year 2, which would be 26, 27, what do you anticipate the debt period for that?
I put that on a 20-year
Okay.
projection, yes. So we can now look at the details for our year 1, 25-26 draft capital budget. And so I'm going to turn this over actually to the administration department or the CAO to discuss the next 2 projects.
Okay, thank you, Lena. Through the chair to council. So the first project that we're looking at under the administration department is the community solar garden. As council is aware, this has been a project that the municipality has been working with in collaboration with our partners, the municipality of the District of Shelburne and the municipality of the District of Argyle. And we've been working with AREA, which is an energy enterprise that was established through intermunicipal service agreement of Mahone Bay, the towns of Antigonish, and the towns of Berwick. The project that we're looking at here is the community solar garden interest during construction. So this is the amount that we would have to pay during the construction. The $840,000 is our portion. We're approximately a 56% partner. It's important to note that this only goes forward if the application is successful, and if we're successful in negotiating a power purchase agreement with Nova Scotia Power, and if we're successful in the procurement of the required construction services. So all of those pieces have to fall into place before the project would move forward, and it's only if the project moves forward in its complete fashion to construction that we would incur these costs. So it's quite conditional. And the strategic priority is the climate change action, so it is an identified item in our local climate action change plan, and it will be owned and operated, not by the municipalities in partnership with each other, but it would be owned and operated by an intermunicipal service agreement corporation, which would be a structure similar to the MJSB or the LCLC, which are the 2 IMSA corporations that you'd be most familiar with. All of this amount is repaid once construction is complete and the long-term borrowing is secured by the Intermunicipal Service Agreement Corporation. So the municipality would carry no long-term debt associated with this project if it moved ahead. So any questions for clarification? Okay. So this is the same project, but this is the land acquisition side. So again, all of the conditions that applied to the first successful application, successfully negotiating a power purchase agreement, successfully procuring the construction services, that all would have to be in place. We currently have an option to purchase the land, and the option to purchase runs until 2027. So no one's going to be able to come in and purchase the land out from under us. But if we do act on the option, the purchase price is $650,000. This is going to be completely repaid by, again, the long-term borrowing secured by the Intermunicipal Service Agreement Corporation. So we pay now and then they repay us later.
Councillor Oiko.
So is the 650,000 isn't going to change?
No, that's
Within the next couple of years, it won't change?
No, we have secured an option agreement that's registered on title with the owner of the property on a fixed price for the 50 acres that we're looking at.
Okay, we'll move on. The Finance Department has one capital project. It's actually a customer portal for access to, for our taxpayer customers to see their taxes and their tax transactions online. So we have started the installation, so we've put a down payment on the product, and as it gets worked through, we know we'll have to finish it in the next fiscal. So we also will be able to use that for access to payroll documents like pay stubs and T4s. We've had a Nova Scotia grant that we got from the province of Nova Scotia, for several years in our reserves for software for finance. So this is what we're using to finance this installation.
Councillor Moore.
Can we go back just once, just back to the solar garden? So, right now, altogether, we're looking at $1,490,000 altogether, correct? Yeah, yeah. I can add those two together. Any more than that, probably not. So you say the board that's going to get set up is going to pay us back. Where do they get their money from to pay us back?
So the project is to be fully financed through the Municipal Finance Corporation. So a loan would be arranged through the Intermunicipal Service Corporation. They would get their financing from Municipal Finance Corporation.
Right.
And from that money, they repay us these two expenses.
If the revenues come from the
Yeah, and the revenue for the ongoing operations of the Intermunicipal Service Corporation, that's from the power purchase agreement.
And that's not a guaranteed, it's what's going to be every year.
So the power purchase agreement has a set amount per kilowatt hour that Nova Scotia Power must pay the owner of the solar garden.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I think we'll move on to engineering, public works, and wastewater. So Mr. Pace, Stephen Pace, our Director of Engineering, Public Works, is here to discuss his projects.
Good evening, Council. Our first project here is the replacement of our wastewater treatment vehicle. We have budgeted of $85,000, and it's to replace an old 2014 truck. We've had an estimate of $6,000 to do body work to bring it to just up to safety standards. So it's time to move on. So we'll be developing the specs that we'll need, and we'll evaluate what the best vehicle type will service it best, whether it be gas, hybrid, or EV. And we'll be bringing back our recommendation to council to make the final decision before making the purchase. Any questions? No? Next one is Osprey Village Commercial Center, and it's a 2-year project. The first project is $250,000, and construction in year 2 of $4,750,000. And the first year is primarily design work, and it basically involves sidewalks, curb and gutters, down Nathan Cirilla Road and up Pine Grove Road to Highway 10. And there is a water course crossing there just in front of the Nothing Fancy store. There's when we built Nathan Cirilla, we had to build a concrete box culvert across that water course, so that will have to be expanded. Stormwater infrastructure. We've also got a budget in there for traffic lights at the foot of Nathan Cirilla Road, where it crosses Pine Grove Road at the entrance to the Walmart. It's getting to be a busier and busier spot there. So we have got money in there for traffic lights at that location. Also includes lighting and seating along Nathan Cirilla Road and Pine Grove Roads. And the beautification project that Economic Development is leading right now, it's in progress. We've had a lot of, we've had the public consultation, but they're going to be, the consultant that's doing that project is going to be developing recommendations for beautification of Osprey Village area. So we've allocated some funds within this project for that. for the recommendations that come out. We don't know the recommendations yet until the project's complete, but we do have a pot of money for that. I should mention that we have to negotiate with and work with Nova Scotia Public Works on the traffic signals, because they have to indicate whether or not they're warranted or not, and also we'll be placing the sidewalk within the Public Works right-of-way on Pine Grove Road, so I'll be working with them closely.
Councillor Oikle.
Yes, I'm wondering, I see there's 4 million in the second year. I'm wondering, is it possible to separate that whole list as to what you're thinking of doing in the first year and what you're thinking of doing in the second year? Is it possible to separate them?
Really, the $250,000 is primarily design work in year one. There's a fair amount of design to the project, so this way we'll be doing design all in year one, get it tender ready, and then go to tender early in the next fiscal year. And so then the 4.7 million is all construction. Yeah. And we were able to successfully get a fair amount of funding to support the project. ICIP 1.8 million roughly, MCGP 1.1 million, an AT fund of 500,000, and we'll be funding the rest through a general operating reserve and through CCBF at just over $1 million. So we have really good funding contribution from our funding partners. Any questions? Our next project is a water tower. This is predicted to be a 3-year project. This has been delayed somewhat. We are looking at site design and site preparation work in year one, once we get the go-ahead. And this is necessary to support anticipated growth in the Osprey Village area. And we have fairly good, we have some funding available, ICIP grant of 73.33%, and that's based on a capital cost of 2.9 million, not the full 5.5. And the balance of that will be cost shared by MODL and the town of Bridgewater as a partnership. We do have a design consultant selected. CBCL has been selected, and the next step in moving this forward is a study of the overall water system of Bridgewater. We're going to be partnering with them, and we are in the final selection we have 2 proposals from consultants to do this water study, and that will shed more light on the size of the water tower, which has been changing, and so the town needs to kind of assess their whole water system. And from that, they'll determine the size of the water tower. So that's going to, we hope to be bringing that back to council shortly for an award.
Councillor Oikle.
Will the town of Bridgewater be putting any funds into that study as well?
Yes. Yeah, it's being cost shared. Next project is the Cookville Wastewater Treatment Plant. We're going into year 2 of a 3-year project. This year we predict around $6.5 million, and next year about $17 million. The total project cost is $24.5 million. The design consultant is EXP Services, and the construction has been awarded to Pomerleau. And things are well underway and moving along quite well on that project, and that will support the expansion of the growth in Osprey Village. And here again, we were able to get great funding, ICIP grant of $6.67 million, MCGF $4.1 million, additional ICIP funding of $5.3 million, and MODL cost about $9.4 million out of from debt and reserves. And it was a great allocation that our folks worked on internally to get the funding from another AT project assigned to this one and the Osprey Village sidewalk project reallocated. So it's been great news to bring our portion of the cost down.
Councillor Bell.
Question to Steve, through you, please. The work that's being done here now at this Cookville plant, we lost our sand trap bed that was to the side through this project?
Yeah.
Okay. So there is no backup if there is any mechanical problem with the plant?
No, and that was a recirculating sand filter known as RSF system, and it really hadn't been used for years and was really of not much value. It was just in the way, and it really hasn't even been serving as a backup. Technically, it was served as a backup, but it hadn't been operated for so many years. It probably wouldn't work as a backup anyway. So, through the analysis, when we started the project, we looked at all sorts of different technologies for the plant. The design consultants working with our folks here, we looked at 6 or 8 different technologies to make sure we were doing the right one, and that just didn't play a role in the whole project. Yeah. The next one is the Nathan Cirillo pump station generator backup power, and that is going to be a permanent backup power for the Nathan Cirillo pump station, which is located just to the left of the Nothing Fancies store down there. You'll see on the side, and that's becoming a major pump station with a lot of wastewater flow into it. So we needed to have reliable, good backup power. So that project, we ordered the generator last year. It's a 1-year delivery, and it will be arriving and installed in the coming fiscal year for $140,000, and that'll be funded out of sewer reserves. Next one is this municipal services building, our new building here. There's repairs being made to our HVAC system. There was design errors in the initial building, and there's been a lot of retrofitting done. We have yet to take over the system from the contractor. And all this work that has been happening over the last few years and upgrades is going to be funded through. We have to fund it up front, but we'll be reimbursed from the design firm their errors and emissions insurance. So we'll be getting reimbursed for all that. The original budget was around $400,000 in total.
Do we get a carrying cost on that?
We'll be putting in all our costs, including project management services from our outside. We had a project manager on the building, Andrew Amos from Catalyst Consulting. Will be incorporating that, legal costs, I think, and everything we're compiling. We have all those being tracked. As far as carrying costs, that's probably a question more for Elaine. If it's all a part of our cost, I guess, yeah.
Through to the chair, I don't know the terms on carrying costs for the warranty work, if we'll get that back.
So, yeah, just so to clarify, we have advanced litigation on a negligence and breach of contract basis against the design firm and the other associated companies. Generally, they haven't contested any of it, and we've put in the required documents to avoid any limitations issues, to allow us to work with them to get to the end result. So we'll be putting a total cost to them at the end of the day with the expectation that they would pay it, with or without prejudgment interest. But that'll all be confirmed, have to be approved by council before it's finalized.
Design firm has been cooperative and acknowledged, and they've notified their insurance company before we started this whole process. So it's been ongoing for several years now. J-Class roads, we have a provincial paving partnership, and we allocate $350,000 a year towards that partnership. The municipality recommends through council and roads that we see as priority, and in the fall of 2024, the roads were submitted for our recommendations. So Darby's Head Road, St. Augustine Road, Riverside, Freeman, Riverview, and Church. So we'll be awaiting the province's decision whether or not any or all of those roads be paved. And they typically get back to us later this year and then go to tender and often get it done usually towards the latter part of the year, or sometimes even carried over into the following year. But we have $350,000 typically put into the pot. Some years we get some roads, sometimes we get several, and there's a $2 million pot for the whole province for J-class road paving. It's for capital upgrades, so it's not a big pot to be shared province-wide. Summer Road is a municipal road in Italy Cross. It's just located, it's a short cul-de-sac off of Toma Road, which is also a municipal road. And we're looking at spending some money there to upgrade storm drainage and to widen out the cul-de-sac and do some grading and gravel. There's currently trees growing where there should be ditches, and so there's been some stormwater issues there. So we want to do a little bit of work on that municipal road. It's a gravel road and will be maintained as a gravel road. We just need to bring it up to standard a little better. Center School demolition and remediation, we have a budgeted cost on the high side of $5.5 million. Over this past year, which was year one, we completed a hazmat survey, which is identification of all the hazardous materials, and we also attained an estimate for removing the building itself. And we also conducted a phase 1 environmental site assessment, or ESA, was done in previous years, but we did both a phase 2 and a phase 3 ESA in the past year. And that basically identifies the soil contamination on the site, the extent of it, and the type of materials that we're dealing with. There's a lot of boreholes that were done to sample the soil. So they've through the consultant and the site professional, they've identified the scope of the contamination. And so the approximate cost to take the building down and remove all the hazardous materials is roughly $4.2 million. And the site remediation, or the soil remediation, ranges from about $300,000 up to about $1.1 million, depending on the level of clearance that we want to obtain, if we want a Tier 1 or Tier 2. Tier 1 being the higher level, allowing for future potable water use on the property. Or we could end up with something in the middle. So there's quite a range, and typically this project is shelf ready now. We just have to get a tender document prepared, but we are looking for funding. And so the last project we did at Riverport School, we were able to get 73 1/3% funding.
Councillor Oikel.
So I just want to clarify that the $5,500,000 is the cost without any grants?
That's the total project cost.
Okay, so if we are looking to get grants of around 60, 70, why do we have to save $5,500,000? Why don't we bring that down? Because we're planning to get grants for it anyway.
Elaine, Director of Finance will answer that. Yeah.
Through the chair to Councillor Oikel, we show you the whole cost of the project, which is the $5.5 million, because that's going to be the cost. We've already anticipated in this budget that we're going to get a 73 1/3% grant. So that's why it says the project will not go forward without it, because we've anticipated that grant in the 5-year plan. Okay, so it's already been reduced by 73% on the funding side, if that makes sense.
Just so that I understand, and for other people to understand too. So we always have to show what the actual cost of it is, regardless as to whether we get grants or not.
Yes, through the chair, that is correct. We're not allowed to report our projects at net.
Right,
Yeah.
okay, good. I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Councillor Vino.
Thank you. Stephen, can you just clarify one point? You had said that it's ready now to start looking for grants and get the tender ready. So do you have the tender basically ready and it just sits there until we get the grant and then you put it out? Because you probably couldn't put a tender out now without the funding being secured, right? Is that how that would work?
That's right. We have all the documents, all the phase 2, phase 3, and ESA, or environmental site assessments, which are all documents that's basically, they're very detailed technical reports that outline the type and extent of all the contaminants and hazardous materials, and the same with the hazmat assessment. So we have 3 documents that would form part of a tender package. So we haven't gone ahead and prepared an actual tender package yet because we wouldn't need the funding in place. So with Riverport School, it was shelf ready. So we have all the documentation, environmental assessments completed, and we just waited for the right opportunity to come along for funding. If we could get the funding, we would do it this year. Next one is the green compost carts. We allow $60,000 a year. This is up from a few years ago, but as the inventory out there is getting aged, they're having to replace more bins. So it's an annual purchase. They're purchased by the MJSB on our behalf, and they're distributed through our provider, GE All Trucking. Next one is Wiles Lake Barn demolition. There's an old barn structure on site. There's no hazardous materials located in the building, but it's been deemed unsafe. There's a big sliding door that's had to be fastened shut. So we don't really see a purpose for it, and it is becoming a safety hazard, and we don't want staff even entering it. So we would like to go ahead and demolish that building this year. And the next one is an annual large pump replacement rebuilding program of $25,000. This is to really have an inventory of spare pumps. A lot of these pumps are 6 to 12 month delivery items. So we need to have accessible replacement pumps. And so the one we're looking at, the ones we're looking at this year is the Nathan Cirilla pump station, having a spare pump for that. And also in New Germany, a spare pump for either pump station 1, 2, or 5. And those will be funded out of sewer reserves. And this has been a program in place that we've had for a number of years now, and we see ongoing in the future. Our next project is a wastewater treatment options study, and this was raised by council in recent time about determining the options for our current wastewater treatment plants in both New Germany and Concro Bank. So we've allocated some funds to have a study before we kind of proceed with and knowing the future of those facilities. So we have deferred a few smaller capital projects while this is being decided. This is actually the beginning, year 1 of this new program that we see, an annual manhole cover repair and replacement program. Basically, it's to uncover and adjust to grade and repair and replace manhole covers to allow for access for maintenance and monitoring of sewer. A lot of these manhole covers are located about 2 feet under gravel roads and hard to locate, and they're getting to the point they need some repair and maintenance, and to be elevated for easier maintenance, and being funded from depreciation reserves.
Councillor DeLong.
Thank you. Is this a new program?
Yeah, we have been doing it off and on as needed, but this is sort of a new program that the wastewater folks would like to see $20,000 a year over the next number of years to kind of start to work on them. Yeah.
Do have a question from Councillor Smith, who's joining us via Teams. So, Councillor Smith.
Hi, thank you. Oh, there's a bit of an echo, but on your last slide, where you said that some projects, have been deferred while we do the wastewater treatment option study. Can you just speak to what projects are being deferred in the meantime?
The one that is probably the most important one was last year, the Conqueror Bank wastewater treatment plant. We had a caustic soda project there that we had a budget of $350,000. We had the design done, it went out to tender, and the prices came in at around $1 million. So that project, we wanted to kind of rescope, rethink, and perhaps procure differently, maybe be perhaps more of a general contractor ourselves and piecing out some of the work ourselves and to try to, and look at the scope again to see if we can reduce that. So means that we just wanted to, we did defer that one. And the second one we looked at, it was suggested at one point that we may have permanent generators at each pump station in New Germany. And we don't have adequate land there, so each pump station would require land acquisition and design and so on. So we were allocating about $200,000 a year for the 6 years for the 6 pump stations. So we just put a hold on that. And we do have a portable generator that we just bought. Actually, we just took delivery, I think this week. Which services the 6 now on a mobile basis. We can go from one pump station to the other. So, but it was a project that was raised by council, so we did put it forward but we ended up sliding that one off. So you won't even see it presented here.
Councillor Oikel.
I remember in 2020 that there were projects at the wastewater in New Germany that needed to be done for many years, and then we put them off in 2020. Have they been done? So those.
Yes,
So that's all done. So we don't need to worry about that during this time of doing this project.
No, that project was completed last year. Actually, we just finished up a few deficiencies in the last year. But
I couldn't remember if we had ended up doing it or not. So great.
Yeah, that was about a $900,000 to $1 million project.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Just wanting to make sure.
Councillor Moore.
It was, thanks. It was the I&I project, and it was deferred in 2020. No, it was in the budget 2020. It was deferred the year before that, and it's been completed.
Actually, we went back to 2015 when we had the original study done.
Yeah.
So finally.
All right, thank you.
And this is our New Germany wastewater plant pH and dissolved oxygen probe for $18,000. And this is to supply and install new pH probe and dissolved oxygen sensor to monitor and adjust treatment processes to ensure our regulatory compliance. And pH, it can be a problem in plants, and some of the reason why it goes off is actually sometimes it's the treatment itself, the treatment system, the aeration, the adding of air tends to lower the pH. It could be from environmental things, even rainwater, what people are putting in the plant. So this will allow us to monitor the pH so that we're more proactive, that we can address it before it becomes a problem. And then we're more reactive. This will allow us to monitor it and address the issues before, and it'll improve our ability to remain in regulatory compliance. And that's funded from sewer reserves.
Thank you. I'll now call upon Mr. Jeff Merrill, our Director of Planning Services. Oh,
Just
perhaps
one
not.
question. Councillor Brooks.
Thank you. We had been talking about waiving of the brush tipping fees. Is that a line item? Is that a cost to us, or is that something we're just budgeting on not collecting those fees? It was something that a lot of constituents have reached out to me, and just a fire service member today asked me about that. So I'm wondering if we can.
Thank you for the question through the chair. So that's an operating expense. We first presented it to the MJSB to ask them to get a cost for waiving of the brush tipping fees. The request originated from the Riverport Fire Department. The recommendation from the MJSB and their Director of Operations was to provide for the waiver year-round to all our residents to support fire smart efforts as they increased in scope right across the municipality. And then we were joined by both the town of Mahone Bay and the town of Bridgewater, so that there was an option for all of residents to get their tipping, the fees for brush waived. Our costs came in approximately $15,000, so we've included that in our operating budget. We still have to present the idea, the concept to council for final approval, and that'll be taking place this month.
Mr. Merrill, our Director of Planning and Development Services.
Thank you. We have a land conservation strategy, the amount of $50,000. This is to identify and map all of our environmentally sensitive areas in MODL and provide a strategic framework for future acquisitions as we move to meet our target of 20% of conservation land in MODL by 2030. Next slide. The public transit is $150,000. This would be for a used bus. The transit route would cover Osprey Village. And we do have a carryover. We have the gas tax earmarked for this project, and it's been a carryover since 23-24 fiscal year. There's $150,000 for an e-permit system platform. This is to replace our existing permit tracking. So this is like building permits, or subdivision permitting, development permits. This will replace our existing system. It will be an online system where the members of the public will be able to submit applications online, pay for those online, and interact with the appropriate administration staff through the website. Funding for this, we received funding through the Municipal Innovation Program grant, and we also have contributions from our partners, and our partners are the Region of Queens, Town of Bridgewater, and the Town of Lunenburg. Next slide. We have $50,000 for land purchases for conservation. So this gives a little bit of funds, so if there's opportunities that arise throughout the year, that council has some funds. So if a nonprofit organization comes in and would like to partner with us on something, that we have funds to set aside to contribute towards conservation land.
Thank you, Mr. Merrill. We can move on to our Director of Recreation, Parks and Tourism, Ms. Trudy Payne.
Yes, thank you. So the first project under the Recreation and Parks and Tourism Department is titled MARC Facility Reimagining. The MARC is one of the 3 regional parks outlined in our park standards document. And at the special council meeting, council discussed having better plans in place, like the one that was developed for Sawpit Wharf Park recently, before making major upgrades to our parks, and that our focus should begin with the regional parks. So this budget reflects estimated costs to issue an RFP to engage the public in reimagining the MARC. A planning assistance grant will be applied for to the province to hopefully help offset the cost of this project and the cost of the next slide that I'll be speaking about. And that's the Wiles Lake Park reimagining. Very similar to the MARC reimagining. This is one of the 3 regional parks identified in our park standards document. The other regional park is our River Ridge, and it is essentially at a maintain stage. So the focus this year, based on the special council meeting, was to focus on the other 2 regional parks. And again, the planning assistance grant we're applying for will hopefully be applied to both of these reimagining, and it's our intent to issue one RFP for both parks so that we would work with one firm as we move both projects forward. This slide is upgrades to the Mark Ball Field, a project cost of about $150,000, and this is to extend the fencing on the ball field, do some repairs to some of the fencing that is there, and reposition four of the dugouts. Extending this fencing will help mitigate risk of possible vehicles accessing the ball fields. Oh, sorry. This slide is wayfinding. This is a carryover. This is a project that has been awarded to a signage firm. We're hoping to have all signs completed and erected by the end of April, first part of May, before our parks open. And the funding from this was from the Canada Community Building Fund. So this is a carryover to complete that project.
Councillor Brooks.
Do we have any sort of breakdown on what that 340,000 represents in terms of the signage?
I can get you the contract.
That would be great, thank you.
I can
Yeah, I
I'll
didn't-
email that to you.
Thank you, Trudy, I
You're
appreciate
welcome.
that.
No problem. I'll write that down before I forget it. Okay. The next slide is to do with internal parkway finding strategy. And so we had a strategy for the bigger park beacons and park gates, so some of that external signage, for lack of a better word, and rules. This is really around the internal, so the arrow, the directional signs that tell you to take this pathway as opposed to this pathway, some interpretive signage. So if you're going in, for example, Miller Point Peace Park, where there's different directions that you could take, you know from point to point where you're going. And this was repeatedly mentioned in the 2023 park survey that we did, not just for Miller Point, but for all of our parks to have some internal wayfinding. So we want this strategy to match. And then you'll see in subsequent years, we have funding allocated to enable us to start implementing this.
Just if I might.
Sure.
When it comes to signage in parks, are there standards for what those look like that are consistent across parks? Or do we create our own standards for that? If you know, do you know what I mean? I'm not sure I'm being clear, but.
So the purpose of the wayfinding strategy, and perhaps Mr. Waters can speak better than I can, but it was to have a uniform look so that when you do go into one of MODL parks or in MODL anywhere, the wayfinding signs are going to be consistent, same look, same font, same, so that it's it might look different than in another community, but it's a signature look for MODL. And Mr. Waters, if you may.
When we did the strategy, the actual sign structures, there's no consistency for that. We had it designed that would look well. There are consistent symbols in signs that are universal. There was actually 2 incidents where we actually created our own not Indian Parks, but the one up in, River Ridge, not River Ridge, the
Indian Falls?
Newburn, Indian Falls. We created that one ourselves, but the majority we use are standard that are used across the board. So they're all consistent, the same.
Thank you. And there are some icons that hasn't been created. So we have, like, for example, at Oakland Conservation, we wound up creating some of our own icons to reflect the conservation and came up with our own symbols in conversation with Micah. And the Hillside Cemetery Monument, this is the cemetery that is located at our MARC facility. As folks can recall, we had a couple of individuals come and do a presentation around the Hillside Cemetery. We're having the research that they conducted verified by the South Shore Genealogical Society, which may lead us to updating our interpretive panel that's there and the Small Rock Monument. But the intent was to look at, this would be coming back being in an RFP and coming back to council for future consideration, but to erect some kind of monument so that family members could decide whether to to put their family's name on that monument.
Councillor Oiko.
Does this 150,000 include the design, or is that separate?
No, that would include everything. It would be a proposal that we're putting out saying this is what we want it to do. We'd be putting criteria in that proposal such as like low maintenance, resilient to the weather that we have. And so depending on the material, would affect the price. So we don't have an RFP right now, so this is kind of a placeholder until we know exactly what that RFP looks like.
Just to follow up on that, to Trudy, through you. So the Recreation Department has come up with the design that they want. They're not asking someone else to come up with the design. You've kind of come up with how you'd like it.
No, that's what the request for proposal would be.
Oh,
We'd be
okay.
asking people to, this is what we need to have happen. This is some of the
Okay.
criteria that we'd want in your design. Please submit your proposals, and then we would select from there.
Councillor Brooks.
Do we have any sense yet on the family's participation with this? My only concern, I think it's a good idea, unless we build a monument that's empty, and then we've spent a lot of money to not achieve anything. So I'm just curious what the families are feeling.
That was a point that we just discussed today, and one that I raised at directors, because I had similar concerns. So when we bring this back to discuss for the operating capital, I was going to raise it then. I think we need to do a bit of a campaign or an engagement with the families to determine and gauge how many family members would be putting loved ones' family members' names on this, because you're quite right, that too is one of my concerns, and so I was going to raise that at that point. But for the purposes of the capital budget, if we're going to proceed and if we do have enough family members, we would have to have funds allocated. But I appreciate that comment. Thank you.
Councillor DeLong.
Thank you. Will you be consulting with the original proponents for this project on the outcomes? There were the Genealogical Society, I think it was, that.
So we have reached out to the Genealogical Society. They are verifying the research that the two individuals had conducted. And the motion of council was that if the Genealogical Society verifies that research, we would update our interpretive panel that we have there and the rock monument that we have recognizing the individuals buried at that cemetery. So we're verifying the names. Is that the question?
Sort of, but I'm also wondering if the two individuals who originally brought this to us will be consulted on this project going forward at all.
Certainly are aware that council made the motion. I guess that would be something that council would need to decide whether you want, if we issued the proposal. Are you suggesting like helping selecting this type of monument if we get to that stage?
I think I'll leave that to you, how you conduct this. I just was wondering if they were going to be involved in any way, given that this was their original idea and wish.
I've certainly notified them throughout the process when things were coming to council. I would certainly notify them if we get to the point of issuing the request for proposal and when it comes back to council for final consideration. So I do communicate.
And they have talked to me as well. I think they're just anxious to see this recognized in a different way than what has been the past, and recognize that it was a municipal spot and that there were some inaccuracies in the documentation and the research that they did. So, and they've been in touch with me. I think they're following us in terms of what we do. So I'm sure if they wish to make a comment on the future steps, I just think they want to see something done, so.
And if I just could clarify that it was a community member in 2018 that brought this forth to council. The research that was used was the research that was done by the South Shore Genealogical Society at the time. So when we did do the interpretive panel and we did do the monument, it was based on the research that we had to date and that the South Shore Genealogical Society had done. And this was approved by council based on community recommendation of how we should be recognizing the folks, and they were the ones that recommended the interpretive panel and the rock monument that we have there today.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you. I think this is a good idea, but I'm just wondering, most of us here, I don't know if there's anybody that hasn't been involved in buying a gravestone in their lifetime yet, so if you haven't, good for you. But I'm wondering if $150,000 is a little bit of overkill, if it could be something that was maybe just a slate in the ground. Does it have to be a huge, big monument to put the names on? I'm just asking.
And this is a placeholder, and it would all depend upon the request for proposal and what came out and what kind of materials. Did I do extensive research? No, but I did reach out to AMA, and I spoke to somebody locally that has dealt in a past profession with monuments, and I actually brought that amount down from the amount that he had recommended. So it would all depend upon the material that you use, and I have bought a gravestone in the past, and they're not cheap just for a headstone. So I was really just basing it on that until we have more information on the request for proposals if we go that route. I didn't want to underestimate in the scenario that it came in, and then we'd be wanting to go with the design and not having adequate funding. Next is our Miller Point Peace Park, looking at constructing a new accessible trail within the park system, and also creating an accessible trail that would, anybody that's been to Miller Point Peace Park, what we call the outer parking lot and the inner parking lot. I believe it was Councillor Oikel on Tuesday that said there's a pathway that's been created just by people naturally taking it. So we'd be looking at making that an official trail from the outer parking lot to the inner parking lot, and looking at constructing an accessible canoe, kayak, boat launch. This is estimated cost of $478,000. We are highly anticipating funding from a provincial grant of $150,000, and anticipating at least $20,000 from the accessibility grant for the boat launch. Indian Falls Park accessibility upgrades. So this is an estimated cost of about $350,000 for anybody that has been to Indian Falls. And if you haven't, I encourage you to go. It's a beautiful spot. As you drive into the park, you will notice there's a look-off that gives you a nice view of the falls, and then a nice grassy area. So what we're anticipating to do is to develop some accessible trails to that look-off and to that grassy area, and to make that area more, to make it accessible and a picnic area. And upgrading one of the current pathways to make it, to meet the accessibility grade, and to possibly look at installing accessible vault toilets. Right now, we have porta potties that are installed each summer or each season at that particular facility. Looking at the accessibility audit, the only thing that would really be missing to bring that to the standard of maintenance would be some accessible parking spaces at that facility. So we'd be looking at the Canada Community Building Fund.
Servino.
Are these projects the last things that are really in the queue for Indian Falls? Once these would be completed, do we really have basically we can check that box to say, this park right now, all we really need to do is maintain. We've made upgrades to it, and it's good to go based on some of those Recreate Park documents we went through in the last council term?
Yes, based on my opinion, yes, other than the couple of accessible parking spaces, which depending on the tender, we might be able to get in. I would say yes. There's, in the accessibility audits, there was some other higher priced suggestions if we wanted to reach like a really gold standard, which was widen the roadway and pave the roadway. I would anticipate most people are driving to the park, so I was focusing more on what was when you get there, get out of your vehicle, and how you can access that. So, and long, yes, that's the goal.
Counselor Brooks.
Just to confirm, so presently the only thing at this park that makes it not fully accessible are the parking spaces? Is that correct? Did I hear that?
Washrooms and the fact that we would do the grassy area is not accessible. So this would bring it to a much more accessible.
So when we bring in the portable accessible toilets, that doesn't count as making the park accessible?
It adds an element of accessibility. If that's
Could you explain that further, please?
It may make the washrooms more accessible, but it may not make something like the access to the outlook accessible. It may not make the trails accessible. So you can put accessible features, but it may not be completely accessible. And with the Rick Hansen standards, there's different things that you can do that allows you to have a higher level of accessibility. And I see that our deputy CAO is anxious to speak to this, so I'm going to shut up.
In doing the accessibility audits, our regional accessibility staff person gave some really valuable advice that I found really illuminating. So she mentioned it's not going to be possible for us to make every feature of every part of our park fully accessible. And in fact, in doing so, you would stand the chance of compromising the actual value of the asset. You know, if you have special trails that are closed in and provide a unique experience, turning those into accessible ones that meet all of those standards can change the experience. But what we want to strive for is that when you're trying to make a park more accessible, what is the draw? What is the heart or the experience? So, Councillor Brooks, you had pointed me towards Victoria Park, and the ravine there was just spectacular. So, Indian Falls, the spectacular feature is the falls themselves. And so, if we want to make that park accessible, we need to make sure that somebody can arrive in their vehicle and go from there to experience the falls. And so that's all that this is addressing, is the space from the parking space, which needs to be accessible, and then having the facilities available, such as picnic tables and a washroom, and then being able to get to the heart of the park so that you can experience it.
Yeah, thank you for that. I guess my question is really, is it the heart of the experience, the view of the falls, or the washroom? Because there's $250,000 here for accessible vault toilets. I know I keep harping on this. I'm just wondering if that's going to be the most memorable thing for anybody who's coming to the park to say, wow, they dropped $250,000 on an accessible vault toilet. I don't even remember what the view was. I mean, if that's really the best use of our money, I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
All I can say is often when I go to places, I have to use the bathroom. So if I can't get in the bathroom, then that's going to be that would be problematic. But yes, that is the experience, and I think Alex or Mr. Demers experienced it well, said it well, and that's exactly what Ellen had said. You got to think about the experience of the park, and that is truly the experience when people are going to Indian Falls. You also have to think about the amenities that people do use when they go to the park if they're spending several hours there.
Counselor Smith, who's online.
Thanks. I just wanted to ask a question about, the accessibility audits in the different parks. Can you just remind me, like River Ridge and Indian Falls aren't in the same district, but they're really in the same area, the same kind of communities, culture, that area. But can you remind me, like River Ridge can't be brought up to the same kind of accessibility standard as we're talking about with Indian Falls, right? So like a family who wanted to go for a picnic in the area, and who needed the accessibility upgrades, this would kind of be their option in the area. Am I right about that?
Yes, you are correct in saying that. I wouldn't say that River Ridge is impossible, it just costs you a higher price tag to make it accessible, and that is always what we look at when we're making, when we're making the recommendations. So for River Ridge to be completely accessible, it's upgrading that roadway, and that would be a significant cost. So at this point in time, we're not recommending that. We're looking at where does it make sense. So yes, Councillor Smith, in that area, Indian Falls would be the more accessible park if people were looking to go in that area. And I would say Church Lake as well, because different experience, but probably more accessible. The next slide is trucks for tourism and recreation events. The estimated cost is $85,000. What that would actually cost would depend upon the assessment of whether it's gas, hybrid, or EV. This would be primarily used for the tourism and recreation prime season, which would be from May to the end of September. With council making the decision to go to a visitor information services, that's how I call it, as opposed to a center, which is a brick and mortar. Our staff are going to where the people are and doing pop-ups and taking a number of equipment with them when they go to those events.
So Reinhardt.
Thanks. I'm just wondering if when these come up, do we consider used vehicles as well, or is it only new vehicles?
We have in the past always bought used vehicles for our park staff. I think that's the only folks that we have looked at. I mean, we certainly could look at used for sure. I did do some. I know one of the questions, maybe I'll save it for later because it was a clarification. This is only for clarification. I was just going to give a cost breakdown. I was asking about rental, and I did do that, so I'll bring that up later. This was looking at a new vehicle, just from a safety, warranty, maintenance point of view. Probably would use the vehicle for 10 to 12 years. This annual contribution to Trails Group was well spoken to at the operating, but it's also included to show because it comes from our Canada Community Building Fund. This is an annual contribution that Council has traditionally given to our trail groups that work tirelessly with great passion to maintain the trail system that we have in the municipality. This year, the recommended per kilometer rate is at $642. Last year, Council had provided staff direction to increase that by 10% from last year. And then art on the trails or in the parks. Last year, we had $30,000 budgeted for this because due to shortage of staff, that project wasn't undertaken. So staff are recommending carrying over this $30,000 and budgeting $20,000 in this for a total of $50,000 for art in the trails or in the park. And we do issue RFPs to engage artists in this project. And then land purchases, open space, this is really a placeholder. We budget $50,000 in case there's an opportunity that comes around for us to purchase land for future recreation purposes, similar to the conservation land. And then Saw Pit Wharf, last year we undertook a public consultation process and had a concept plan developed. We had asked the consultant to to create an implementation plan. Year 2 or phase 2, which would be this year, is looking at getting engineered designs done at approximate cost of $200,000. And in the 5-year capital plan, you would see the funding allocated to complete the project over the next couple of years. And pickleball courts, $600,000 has been allocated in the budget or recommended in this budget. Council had has made a motion directing staff to work with the South Shore Pickleball Club, who would be entering into a lease agreement with the municipality to create 6 pickleball courts on property at the Mark with the amount that they would be needing to pay back outlined in the lease. Part of that motion was that council would pay the upfront cost for that, so this project could be undertaken this year. And the last slide, I think, which for me is the e-bikes. We had received $31,000 in funding last year, and again, we were short-staffed. So this is to purchase e-bikes, storage containers, bikes, and all the helmets that go along with that, because we are looking at rolling out a loan program for e-bikes to encourage people to use a different mode of transportation. It could help those that have no means of transportation get to point A to point B, or it could help convince those that are looking at an e-bike but not sure if they want to invest in one, to be able to utilize this. And we have partnerships with the LCLC and hopefully the South Shore Regional Library. And this is a carryover, essentially.
Councillor Brooks?
Just a quick question on the pickleball courts. So we build them, we've got 6 courts, and the families that live right near there find that they are hating the noise of pickleball. And they're going to sell, but they can't sell because of the new quality of life. Their house price drops. Does any of that fall back on us as the municipality for building something that diminished somebody's house value?
No. So,
If I can
yeah,
sorry.
because we don't have land use planning that puts in a requirement that's being violated. There is I think Halifax introduced a bylaw that sets a distance and we exceed that distance. So even if you try to apply a negligence standard and could provide some level of distance, for the biggest unit in Nova Scotia, we exceed that distance, and it's quite forested between where they're putting the pickleball courts and the nearest home. So we think there's low risk, but I know the pickleball people are also planning to put I would have called them a windshield on a tennis court. I don't know what they call on a pickleball court, but to try to also stop the noise. So they are aware and they are trying to mitigate to the extent that they can.
Thank you. Just to wrap up here, so this is just a financial summary of your 5-year capital plan that, as we discussed, is meeting your strategic priorities for this fiscal and in through the 5-year plan. So our next steps is for, I guess, this is our last slide, so you can make adjustments as council is their, this is their budget, so you can add projects to the list, you can remove projects from the list, you can defer projects, and you may also direct staff to provide further information on any of the projects presented. So we'd like to thank you for your time.
At this point, if there's any public input, that might be helpful. Would you like to speak? You're welcome at the podium. We'll just ask you to identify yourself and where you live, and yeah, go ahead,
evening.
Nancy.
I'm Nancy Vino from Winslow Lake. Your worship, councillors, I took a few notes while I was back here. One thing I didn't see on the budget, and it's been spoken about for a long time, and that's improved services for the New Germany area. I know we've talked about it a lot. I thought the council had some support for that this past year, but when I hear about municipal roads and J-class roads, Derby Head and Riverside and some of these roads, and I'm thinking, beautiful places, where are they going? New Germany, we are trying to get something done, especially on School Street with the heavy traffic, and just the perimeter of the community. To see no investment there is disappointing for myself. Recently, the topic of pickleball courts, a great sport. That investment of 600,000, is this for a private club? What's the use? Who can use that facility besides the pickleball community, the private club? That's just a question I had.
Yes, and I can speak to that. So this is one of we will have a lease agreement with the proposal is to have a lease agreement with the pickleball court that will outline the lease payments that they'll make over a period of years. And it will also outline what public use will be made available, the number of hours, what the expectation is around it. It is a pickleball club that is going to sign on with MODL for them to manage the site, but a provision is being made within that for the public to have use of it as well.
Okay, thank you. The water tower costs, one of the councillors asked if it was shared with the town. What is the percentage?
Yep. So the cost sharing is 50/50 on the water tower. And so the water tower, once built, gets turned over to the Bridgewater Public Service Commission. So the two municipal units share the cost, and then they move it to the utility that will actually operate it.
There was talk about putting $20,000 a year aside for manhole covers. Certainly, maintenance is important. I just thought, well, we've been putting money aside for Sherbrooke for years. How would the people that need to repair manholes think if the money wasn't being allowed to be used, it's set aside for that project, but it's not being used? So, you know, I'm just kicking the can here, but we're looking at upgrading parks and doing extra things. I did see in the brochure money for picnic tables and park benches. I'd love to see one spare picnic table placed on the Sherbrooke property. There's an abandoned one there. I would actually donate one if council gave me permission, and I would have it delivered to that site, just so that someone could sit there if they visited the property. Not a big investment. $200 will buy a picnic table, but with your permission, I'll donate one. One thing I think that council, a decision that was made a few years ago, and I think council should look at, maybe reversing. I don't really know the dollars on it. It was supposed to be a cost-saving measure. We used to have 2 spring and fall pickups, and we only have 1 now. And yes, every 2 weeks you can put a large item to the roadside, but you cannot put some of the items that are in the spring and fall cleanups to the roadside. You can only put metal to the roadside once a year. I travel a lot of roads. I've done a lot of litter cleanup. Sometimes decisions that are made, you see what happens when people want to get rid of things. Even, you know, removal of tipping fees on some things helps sometimes. But the spring and fall cleanup to me was valuable. I should allow somebody to speak on that. I have 1 or 2 more topics.
So on the spring and fall cleanups, the change in the service level was approved by council, and it's reflected in our contract with GE. So we do provide additional cleanups after storms. So we make arrangements for GE to send out extra trucks to pick up things on different occasions depending upon what's taking place. And we have included in our operating budget a request for council to waive tipping fees for brush, for residents to drop off brush as part of a Fire Smart program. But the contract that we're currently in provides for the council-directed one large cleanup. And then the adjustment was to permit more opportunity every 2 weeks to put other things out. Didn't completely replace the second cleanup, but it was intended to help cover the gap that was created.
Okay.
Maybe just on the School Street, do you want to speak to that?
So the roads in New Germany, School Street in particular, is a provincial road. So we have approached the province about the possibility of sidewalks on that street, and we did not get permission. They were quite adamant at that point. There is a new school planned to be built. We are encouraging the province to allow a committee from the community to be involved with the planning of the school, which would additionally provide potential after-hour use for communities. There may be an opportunity to revisit the question of maybe not sidewalks, but other ways to get there. But first, we need them to pick the place where the school is going to go, which may lead to additional discussions. But we need the province to give us permission, and they have to do an analysis to ensure that the roadway is wide enough to add a sidewalk on the side. And my understanding from the province is that there is not sufficient room for a sidewalk, but they haven't decided where the school is going yet either. So there may be opportunity for discussion after that takes place.
We really don't need sidewalks, because then you need a special piece of equipment to clear the sidewalks. Paved shoulder to shoulder is much better than having a sidewalk.
Yeah, so typically the province will allow us to cover the cost of paved shoulders when they take the road all the way down to nothing and then build it back up. So we are given that opportunity, but it's only when that takes place. And so they do tell us when that's happening and give council the opportunity. But it's in that circumstance where it takes place. But discussions may change, or options may become available that aren't currently available, depending upon what happens with the school location. But it's certainly, council hasn't lost sight of the fact that that's a continuing request, and it's been noted regularly by a variety of people.
Okay. One other item. I thought that the budget for signage in parks was actually on the high end. And Councillor Brooks, I appreciate the comment you made about the washrooms and the view. You know, what is the priority? But I spend a lot of time in parks and on trails. I don't see the lack of signage. Perhaps there is for people that aren't familiar with the parks, but also I question how much we have to standardize all our signage, because if you leave MODL, the signage in those parks is going to be different. I don't know what the expectation really is. We need signage, but it's a big budget item when you're looking at standardizing signage in all of our parks.
It might be helpful to know, and I can't give an answer how many signs that represents and how many parks that covers. I don't know if that
I'd have
will
to
help.
come back with that answer, yeah.
Yeah. Because I think that it does seem like a large amount, but I think it does cover a large number of locations.
True. When I look at River Ridge Common, there's a ton of money spent on signage in there, and it's beautiful. But do we have to make every park, the signage be the same? I'm not sure on that.
Well, I think that part of it is that the standardizing becomes part of what the recommendations came out of some work that was done on how we standardize our parks and classify the parks. And that wayfinding sign is part of that process in putting signage that looks consistent across. It doesn't cost any more to make them standard. It costs a lot to have a lot of signs, and that I think is, I think that's what's reflected in the amount, is that there are a lot of signs. I can't quote how many, but we'll get you that information,
Yeah,
so you know.
I'm not sure if I'm understanding it all, but to me, it seems like we're spinning our wheels. We have signs in all our parks. We're going to spend more money standardizing them. Like, we're always developing more. And the boat launch and the trail at Miller Point, like, to me, that seems like a new project. And I thought we weren't doing any more park development, that I thought we were just moving on, I guess standardizing them to a certain point, but I didn't think there was going to be like new trails, Indian Falls. I didn't realize there was another trail being planned for there. And the boat launch at Miller Point. I know I've spoken about needing upgrade to the boat launch at Wenzel Lake, which is used from April 1st to the end of October. Every day, someone is fishing there. But that boat launch, like, it's in terrible shape. But to learn that we're having a boat launch put into Miller Point, I'm here to speak. Thank you all for your attention.
Nancy, do you mind just leaving your email, and then we'll get you the information on the signage? Yeah. Should be a document there. Thank you.
It may also be helpful just to clarify the boat launch at Wenzel Lake is not a municipal property. It's, I believe, owned by the province.
But we share some things.
As far as I'm aware, there's no municipal connection to the boat launch at Wenzel Lake.
But it could be some money spent on that?
At this point, maybe we can take a quick 5-minute break, and we'll stick to 5 minutes and come back for further discussion on this. We are going to resume our meeting, and I think we have made all the presentations that we need to for tonight. And I would encourage anyone who may be watching at home, I know in some respects you may think we were quiet tonight. There were a lot of questions posed at our meeting on, or our day meeting on Tuesday. So if you want to get more background on some of the things that you think weren't raised tonight, there is more discussion if you watch that video on YouTube. So I just pass that on as information if you're wanting to hear more detail around some of the things that were proposed. So I think we can open it up now for any other discussion. We've had some public input, and any other comments you want to make on the presentation tonight, or things that may have popped up in your head since we met on Tuesday. Councillor Smith, online.
Hi, everybody. I just want to go back to a couple issues that we had discussed on Tuesday during the day. And the first is about Mush-a-Mush. And this is a really tough one for me because I realize that we need new bathrooms there. But going back to earlier discussions that we'd had at the special council meeting, I feel that the importance of planning is what really sticks with me about this park. The upgrades, say at Indian Falls or even at Miller Point Peace Park, they're kind of like the final touches on those parks, which we had talked about, getting some of these parks finished. And the thing with Mush is that there are a few issues that need to be addressed. We need to know what kind of additional amenities people would like to see in that park. And digging into it a little bit further, the washrooms, even though it seems pretty clear where they should go, there's no accessible path right now to that spot. And it just seems like there's too many factors, and that we really, really would benefit from a plan. It's one of our most beautiful parks, one of our most used parks. And again, it's a destination, and I really think we should do it right. And yeah, I think that's what I have to say about Mush. It really does not bring me joy to say that we're not going to see new bathrooms there right away. But the trade-off of rushing on it seems to me to be too risky. And I'm open to hearing what other people have to say on it, of course. But I've got to say that, when I was canvassing in that area, some of the things I heard about the most was concerns about development, concerns about taxes being too high. And I think that, new washrooms are absolutely important. But if we can work on keeping up maintenance standards, improving maintenance standards, then maybe we can hold off while we get a plan in place. So I have other issues that I want to raise, but maybe I'll just leave that one on the floor for now.
Well, I think you captured what we had agreed to in our initial discussion around how to handle the Mush-a-Mush Park. And it isn't in our budget, in this capital budget now, and we're going to have discussions about that planning piece. and how that will factor into decisions, as we have said, for some of the other, I think there were 4 parks we had or places we had identified for further discussion. So I think what your comments are in line, I think, with what we had already agreed to. So thank you. Unless someone, Councillor Oikel.
I have four things. So I'm just
sorry.
wondering.
Yeah, Councillor Moore is first, and then Councillor Oikel. Okay? Go ahead,
So
Councillor.
I have 4 things. You just want me to do do one at a time? Okay, so I want to talk about the mush bathrooms. And I'm not sure that we need to do a public consultation at Mush to include the toilets. The 2 vault toilets are already in a place that would not make sense to move them, so that the position where the toilets would go is already a given. They're going to be there. The Policy and Strategy Committee in February.
Just hang on. That's not true. Yeah, I'm told here. So.
Oh, so the vault toilets are going to be moved?
They wouldn't be moved, they would be replaced in a different
Right.
location, so you'd have new ones and you'd decommission, yeah.
Oh, so you wouldn't use the same ones?
Because the location that was being planned is in a different location.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, because I was under the understanding from the 2024 PSC meeting that, from what Maria said and what I was listening to, was that we went out and we asked for an estimate of the possibility of vault toilets. And it sounded like in the conversation when I was listening to it, we were using the exact same ones. For the 190,000 was supposed to be towards the better material for cleaning and for accessibility. But it's that 190 was also for putting them in a new place and decommissioning the old ones? Is that what it was?
If Mr. Pace wants to speak to that, but it was my understanding we were putting the vault washrooms in a different location than where the current ones are.
Yeah, and I think there was more work. There was no real planning. Like you said, there was no accessible path to them anyway, so we're putting these accessible washrooms down and without any accessible way to get to them. So it didn't really make sense.
All right.
I think.
No, so I was just under a different understanding of the whole
Yep.
situation.
I think you are correct, Councillor Urkel. There was some discussion about could there be cost savings by replacing the building on top of the vault. Complicating factor was we had the accessibility audits done, and I believe a concept plan was provided by the consultant, which suggested a more suitable location for the washrooms in a different area of the park. And that was a staff concern that was initially raised, that if you attempt to proceed with an individual item without considering the rest of the park, it may not be a wise investment. And we also had concerns with the timeline, because going through the design process would mean we would have been tendering late in the year. And we never want to do that because we already have trouble, because we have to follow public procurement. We know that we have difficulty getting good pricing, and that would make it worse. So we had some reservations about that project, and we would strongly recommend that council not proceed with an individual piece of a park without considering the rest of your accessibility considerations and any wayfinding improvements. And as this council has made very clear, you don't want to get into parks without making sure that the community is supportive of the work that you're doing.
And I totally agree with that. I was just like I said, under the understanding we were going to be using the same spot already. And since we're not going to be using the same spot already, well then, of course, it would make sense to find out what the community would like in the park and where everything should be positioned that would be the best place for them, for sure. But I have 3 other things.
Yeah. Councillor Moore, did you, and then we'll go back to Councillor Smith, or Councillor Vino, and then Councillor Smith, and we'll start the roundabout here. Go ahead,
Thank
Councillor
you.
Moore.
Mine is on the solar gardens. I spoke about this on Tuesday. Right now, $1.5 million going into something that is going to just help 700 homes. And I understand that the money will be apparently paid back by the guaranteed rate of the return, which we're not no. Okay.
So it's repaid by the long-term borrowing. It's 100% guaranteed we get our money back. It's not dependent upon the revenue stream of the Intermunicipal Service Agreement Corporation.
Okay.
They need to get $24 million to build it.
Mhm.
That $24 million includes the repayment to us.
Okay.
So if the project goes to construction and has the loan to do it, we get our money back.
Okay. Right now, I'm just going to stick with the almost 1.5 million. People have seen huge increases in their power bills lately, and right now, to take that kind of money and put it in that budget, whether or not, I know now that it gets repaid, but to put that in that budget right now and not have a guaranteed rate of what we will get over the next, how many years?
So keep in mind, council gave me direction to submit the application.
Yes.
Right, so it's in.
Okay.
Or it's heading in.
Yeah.
So this is only if we're successful. And so the power purchase agreement amount, the number, is a guaranteed multiplier. So it's X times whatever the power generated by the system is. So those are as close to the guarantee as you can be given. The model shows that the profit in year one is somewhere around $1.5 million because there's no loan repayment.
Okay.
And then when the loan repayment starts, it drops down, but it shows profit every year. Over 25 years, based on the estimates, our municipality would be repaid about $250,000 a year. But those are all based upon financial models. If it does better, we get more. If it does worse, we get less. But all of these spends are conditional, and they're all repaid 100%. There's no risk.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that more with me.
Councillor Vino.
Thank you. The question is with regards to the land conservation strategy. It was in operating, and now it's in capital, still at the same amount. And when we discussed it at that time, the plan was to go out and have another company do it if we wanted it done right now. But if we pushed it off, it could be done by staff, was what we had talked about at operating. And I'm wondering where that finished. Like what's the deciding factor there? Are you looking to do it in-house or to put out a request to have somebody else do it?
Yeah, we would outsource the land conservation strategy. I think the discussion might be that we had the other night was around the housing strategy, not the land conservation. That's one where we talked about, instead of going outsource, that we would pivot and we would have two students do that project, and that would reduce that cost for the housing strategy, but that one's in the operating.
And I think I originally asked the question at our very first operating, which is okay if we're going out. Can I make one recommendation as part of that process? When we went through coastal development, we brought maps to our meetings and had residents identify areas that they knew or thought were wetlands in their community that we might not be aware of. Can we make sure that that data somehow gets to those putting these documents together? Because I think those might be our best ally in what's out there in our communities for wetlands, to use some of those documents.
Yeah, we can include that information as part of that project. We can consider that at that time, yeah.
Did that get answered? Okay. Councillor Smith.
I have a clarification from the Tuesday meeting. I brought up the idea of an arts and culture policy around when we were talking about art in the parks. I just want to clarify that I am not suggesting that we should not proceed with art in the parks program until that policy is done. I was simply putting it forward as something for our list that we keep talking about to address in the long term. And I wouldn't want to see that funding jeopardized for this year. I think we have had some really beautiful installations through that program. And I wouldn't want to kind of suspend that while we, update our policies. I think Ms. Payne had mentioned that there's been some artists actually, contacting their office, their department about the program. So it seems to me that we have a bit of momentum with the program. So just wanted to make that clarification in case it sounded like I was asking, for things to be halted until that policy was in place.
The policy discussion's on our list, and the list will come back because we're going to have to prioritize some of those items and have a good discussion. But we are compiling that list, and it will come back at some point sooner than later after we get through budget. We'll have a good discussion about how we work our way through those items. So it's certainly separate from the budget discussion. Apparently I'm told there's 30 items on the list. So we're going to have to work our way through that. But that's, and we'll do that. That's what we'll do, and we've uncovered a lot of things that need input. So we're going to work on that later. Councillor Oikel, we're back to you, and then Councillor Hubley.
Okay, so art on the trail, since we're talking about that, I'm wondering if we can just keep the budget at 30,000, which is what it was, and not add any more, but also just keep that carryover and make all the other years 30,000 rather than having them all varied amounts. Because one year's 24, another year's 25, another year's 26 in the future. But we didn't use the 30 last year, so I'm just thinking rather than adding another 20, just keep it at 30.
I take my direction from council.
So I don't know how would we go about asking or agreeing or whatever? How
You've
does that
just
work?
asked, so if there's general consensus around the table to make that
Art
adjustment,
on the
we can do
Trail
that.
last year was 30. We didn't use it. They're proposing to add an extra 20 to it to make it 50. I'm suggesting we just keep it at the 30 going even this year and going forward rather than having varied amounts.
I would just take a straw vote here as to the 30,000. I see Councillor Smith is online, and I see a no, but there are other people around the table. Could I just see a general show of hands to leave it at 30? Why don't we just say, Councillor Oikel, for this year, leave it at 30, and then we can consider it when we have an arts and culture policy. Would that be?
Yes, yes. I put it at 30 instead of the
Yes.
50,
Yes.
but it was
So
last year.
if you're in favor of reducing it to 30,000, just raise your hand so we have a bit of a straw vote.
What are you asking? I'm sorry. I was doing reducing it to 30.
That art in the park would be in the budget for $30,000. Raise your hand, those in favor. And I'm for 30. 5? It's defeated then. So it will stay at 50. Okay. Councillor.
I was trying to do math to figure out what the savings was with Councillor Oikel's suggestion, so I couldn't vote not knowing.
Anyhow, Trudy, I'm sorry, if you would very quickly point out which line in the budget would speak to projects such as Maliga Lake Boat Launch, because they're not specifically mentioned. And I know you did this on Tuesday, but, yeah, please.
Yes, so council had given direction that we would be discussing Maliga Lake, Sherbrooke Lake, Oxnard's Beach, and Pine Grove Park this year, and so not to budget funding this year in the capital budget, so that's why it's not reflected this year. And so until I have direction, I'm not exactly sure what direction we're taking around those four, so they don't see them explicitly in your budget, but there were, I have to take a look at my budget, the accessibility upgrades and the recreation infrastructure. There's placeholders in those years. So that is where I was thinking if there was direction, that is where some of that could come from. But they're not explicit.
The direction that we do have from council is from the special council meeting on recreation projects, and that was to develop criteria
Right.
so that council can assess what parks you'd like to move to next, so that you have some rationale when residents come forward and say, how come this park has gone and this one hasn't? We've provided you with a framework for making those decisions and then explaining those decisions. So the projects you see in year one are ones that we already had some information ready to go on. Your conceptual work will be on Wiles Lake and the Mark, because those are identified as regional assets in your park standards and your classification. And then from there, we're going to develop the criteria so that you can start to refresh your open space strategy based on those criteria.
I think I can go back now to Councillor Smith and then back to Councillor Oikle.
I wanted to ask a question about tipping fees and whether we have considered waiving, costing out what it would take to waive tipping fees for dangerous and unsightly cleanups where there is a case of financial hardship, disability, mental illness, anything like that, because I have heard from people that I'm thinking of one case in particular where people were all lined up to help someone clean up a property, but the tipping fees were what was kind of standing in people's way, like who was going to pay the tipping fee. So I'm just wondering if that has come across the desk of staff and whether we could receive some information about it.
Mr. Merrill will address this.
Yes, thank you. The Dangerous Unsightly Committee did have at their last meeting, did have a discussion about, is kind of indirectly related to this, but right now staff can approve $1,500, and there's we looked at, staff are going to bring back a report on that $1,500 and what type of work would be included in that. I realize that doesn't answer your question as I'm talking about it. But anyway, I got that out there. It's that's coming. But as far as dangerous unsightly, no, we don't have like anything to offset that. Other than we do have the unsightly assistance program, which is currently $500. That's coming back at the 18th of March with a recommendation from the committee for $1,500. But depending on the type of work, the dangerous unsightly, if you're tearing something down, it can be very costly. If you're just cleaning up, it could be a few $1,000s, could be a few $100s. It really is on a case-by-case basis. But generally, most of the things that we do are probably $20,000 or less. Yeah, and we do have, I'd say maybe a good, 5 to 10 a year maybe that come through, and we are actually hiring contractors to do those works. And of that, some of those would be, maybe could use some assistance, whether they have mobility issues or have, not enough income to take care of the property in a sightly condition. I guess that's a long answer for no.
Our CAO has comment as
Yeah.
well.
So I think maybe the more pointed and focused approach, notwithstanding Jeff's lengthy roundabout talk, would be it's actually the tipping fee is waived for the resident. It's paid by the municipality. So with the brush tipping fee, the resident isn't going to pay. We are. So what you'd be looking at more accurately is a grant for residents who are subject to dangerous and unsightly proceedings that would allow them to access funding in certain circumstances to cover the tipping fees. Because the tipping fees won't, someone has to pay them. And if it's not the residents, then it's the municipality. But I think that's where you would want to focus, is on whether the municipality want to set up a grant for those certain, it could be income-based or situational-based. But I think that's where you'd want to start the discussion.
That just got added to the list, number 31. Can go back to the Unsightly Premises Committee, Dangerous and Unsightly Premises Committee. Councillor Oikle, if you have a couple more questions, maybe
Yeah.
we could take them together, okay?
Sherbrooke Lake, I was just wondering, is there money in operating fund, like a special fund for them that came from somewheres? Was it from the municipality or was it from the residents themselves?
Yeah, so there's $200,000 in a reserve, and that would have been coming from council, so from general tax revenue. And I believe, you're taxing my memory now, but council had made a motion at the time that they would put $50,000 in a year until it built to $200,000, to have a $200,000 reserve, and that's what is reflected. And that's why that reserve is there.
All right, so that would be the money, if we did anything, we would use that money, correct?
There's a $200,000 Sherbrooke Lake
Right,
Reserve.
right, okay. So now my next thing has to do with active transportation. So I know that paved shoulders are not added to roads owned by the province unless they are rebuilt, unless the province rebuilds the road. And then the municipality needs to pay for that addition. And I have mentioned it during my previous term about the condition of the sides of the roads between Victoria Ridge and the town of Bridgewater in Wildville. It's also been mentioned through emails and phone calls, as well as public input by citizens. And it's a long shot, but I am hoping that the Department of Transportation and Public Works has a master list of their provincial roads, and that they kind of know how old they are and what their plan is for rebuilding them. And if they do, could we possibly find out when the specific section of road on the 325 is going to be rebuilt, so that at least we know when it's a possibility to get paved shoulders on the side, and then we can budget accordingly?
That's in their 5 and 10 year.
Yeah, so the province does post their 5 and 10 year capital plans for roads, but if they're not on that list, then there's no plan for them. Like
Right,
they don't
so-
have a year 10 to 15 in their back pocket.
Okay, so, but do we know if that section of road is on that list in the next 10 years?
Definitely not in the 5-year.
Not in the
I'll have
5-year.
to go and look at the 10, because I had Kelly take a look at what
Yeah.
projects we could possibly partner with.
Yeah. And also keep in mind, periodic elections and change in government changes those lists. So they're
Yes,
not
yeah.
committed to anything that's on the list to
Right.
begin with, and certainly not anything that's out, past 5 years.
Right.
So it's, even if it's on the list. and
It
even
could
the-
change.
It could change, they might not do it.
Right. But at least we would know something, right, to possibly plan something, because it
Yeah.
is very dangerous.
So our plan is public transit, to get them
Yes,
in, so they
yeah,
don't have to
yeah.
walk.
But we haven't really said that for sure, right?
Yep, so we for sure put it in our budget.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
we
But I
provided,
mean, the plan as to the route, it's all in discussion with other partners.
Yes, yep.
So until that gets finalized, it's not really for sure.
Yeah, I would suggest there's more likelihood of us getting public transit than that paved shoulder going in on that road.
Okay, great, thank you. At least it's out there, thank you.
Because we can control our decisions around public transit, working with our neighbor, and we have little control over the road construction. But thank you for raising it. Because I'm with you. I know exactly what you mean. Do we have any, did you have more questions, Councillor Oyko?
I am done.
Okay. Okay, Councillor.
Thank you. My question is for Mr. Waters, I think. This isn't in the presentation because it's not being funded. The land acquisition and access to facilitate deliveries. Can you refresh my memory as to how that died?
Currently, it is with a possible proponent that they may actually buy that lot and do it themselves. So we didn't put it back in the budget.
Councillor Burns.
Thank you. My request here is for a straw poll. I told folks on Tuesday I'd come back sort of with a number for Pine Grove. I've been trying to come up with sort of a path forward on this that doesn't do an end run around what we're trying to do with open space strategies, because that's not my intention here at all. I simply just want to try and get a little bit of funds that are set there in the budget, so we're not going around a budget later on. If there are some low-hanging fruit we can do as we develop a larger strategy arising from the report that we're going to get later this spring and from the consultation that has already happened very successfully with Pine Grove residents. So we have a little over $10,000 that's just earmarked for the park. It has to be. It was when the association folded previously. It's in our reserve, and it can really only be used for the benefit of the park. So I'd like at least that much shown there. But I was going to ask for just a sum of $20,000 to be added that, so that there's a chunk of money there if you're going to buy some soccer nets or something else. If there's something like that that is a low-hanging fruit, not a redesign of the park. And also, I'm just asking for the pot of money to be there. Obviously, anything that we do there is going to be authorized by council later once we receive a report. So it's just to properly sort of reflect it in the capital budget, so there is an opportunity to pick those low-hanging fruit. So it's more of a straw poll if people would be okay with that global 30, with 10 of it being from stuff we have to spend on the park and is in reserve only for the park, and then just 20 from general capital reserve for that.
I think if we want, we can take a straw poll, but I think if we want to be consistent, and everybody else is trying to be consistent with our strategy around a plan, we would say, you know, there's 10,000 there. I'm just giving you my opinion because I'm going to vote against you. I'm sorry. But I'm trying to hold to the plan that we did propose, and I completely understand why you're raising it. And it's not that I'm not opposed to investing in that in time, but I think we do need to get that plan. And if there's some easy things we can do with the money that we have, then I think we will look at how we can do that. But I will ask for a straw poll, which is that what?
I was asking for the global number of 30, from
Right.
which 10 of it is really
Right.
already only available to the
Right.
park.
So we're looking at, if you're in support of what Councillor Burns has suggested, or if you have a question, do you want to ask a question first and then I'll take a straw poll? Alex.
Just to put a little plug in for our recreation and engineering staff. I was grilling them this morning about the work plan and whether or not they feel it's achievable based on the capital budget. And let's call it ambitious, just based on construction season and timelines. So it's one thing to have money available in the budget. You also need staff time available to manage it. The lighter end of that would be on the procurement side. So if you were, for example, purchasing soccer nets for a flat field, then that might be less, but as soon as you start purchasing things, you can get into questions of, well, what's the access like? And then, so you might open up a can of worms, and we don't have a lot of space for new cans of worms. So please be cautious of that. If you want to add an actual capital project, staff would suggest to you that you need to remove a different project in order to make space for that.
Yep, sure.
So circumstances might be different if the community would come back together, reform an association and ask for their money back, and let them put a soccer net in.
For anyone listening from the Pine Grove area, I will dance a dance of joy if that happens. Genuinely, anyone listening, please seriously consider stepping forward and doing that. That's why I'm really at this point looking just for some low maintenance level, low hanging fruits that could tide it over until there was a larger plan or we get that association in place.
I'll ask for a straw vote then. Those you absolutely can. Councillor Moore.
Okay, Pine Grove Park, I was here when it was birthed. And it was a lot of community support. The council of the area at that time, it was fundraising, there was dinners, there was auctions, a lot of money was raised, and the park was built along with the municipality's help and grant money and stuff like that. It's not a new park. It's a park that was used over the years. It just so happens that the community organization that overseen it dissolved, which is too bad. So right now, can I ask a question? Is people going into the park right now to use it? Okay. So I don't know if I could go with the 20 extra thousand, but I would suggest the 10,000, it's there, put it in. If there's something that needs to be done immediately, then it's, something simple, I would go with that. But for right now, we're going to get a lot of backlash from other places that have placeholders for, say, Sherbrooke Lake. That's $200,000. And I know that will just be, I could see what can happen on social media when I go home. So I'm just saying I will support the 10,000 going in there, so that if there's something that can be done immediately for the people that's going there, because it is our land and it was a viable park. Thank you.
Just Councillor Vino and then Ms. Payne.
I think you were going to ask for a vote, but before I could vote, well, I like the idea of it, I need to know what we're giving up. To Alex's point, if we have to give up something to put something in, it's hard to vote on something without knowing what we have to give up. That's kind of where I am.
Yeah, because I think
If we can do the 10,000 and not have to give something up, sure.
I think the point that was raised was that from a staff perspective, whether it's 10 or 30, it's still pushing the envelope of what people have capacity to do, given the 31 items on the list. Ms. Payne.
Yeah, the only comment that I wanted to make is that Pine Grove is still a park. It was opened this summer, so it's still within the park system. That's the only point I wanted to raise.
And that's what I meant, yeah.
Councillor Wickle.
And it is being used. People are going there and they're taking their kids there, they're taking their dogs for walks there. So it is still being used as it is right now. And the people are enjoying it as it is right now. Right? And it gets the lawn gets mowed?
We would look after
Yeah,
the maintenance.
so
yes.
it's being used right now, so we really don't need to add it more for now.
I am going to just ask for a straw vote because that's what Councillor Burns has asked. So those in favor of allocating $30,000 for the park in our capital budget indicate by raising their hands. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Burns. Are there more questions? Councillor Smith, you're online patiently, taking part. We hope you're feeling better soon.
Oh, thank you. It pains me not to be there in the room. I had actually just wanted to ask a question about Councillor Burns' proposal, but I'm okay. I think I just keep coming back to I just find the whole parks discussion so hard because we all have visions for the parks in our communities. We know how important they are. And then to weigh that against staff capacity and the need for a plan. I mean, I do find it a little bit heartbreaking to see some projects in my area put off. But it just seems like that's the budget, right?
That's what we're expected to do, is to manage the taxpayers' money and try to do that in a fair and equitable way. And sometimes those decisions become very difficult. And I think we've all seen how difficult that is as we work through this. Are there other questions that people want to raise about the capital budget? Okay. I don't see anything else on the agenda, so I think we are adjourned for tonight. And but I do have one little announcement.
It's a request from the heart.
It's
We're gonna turn it off.
okay.
Wait till she turns